water crisis in Flint, Michigan has shocked and appalled Americans from all walks of life, and for good reason, too. It's simply unacceptable that anyone living in a democracy, let alone the richest country on earth, should lose access to clean drinking water or risk poisoning their kids by doing something as simple as giving them a bath. But while the Flint disaster might be catching all the headlines, a similar crisis out in the American Southwest isn't drawing much attention at all. And it's been going on for decades. Could it be because the people affected are, by and large, Native Americans? Joining me now to answer this question and help explain America's other big water crisis is tribal rights attorney Tara Houska. Tara, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you with us. So some have said that the water crisis affecting the Native American communities in the West is worse than Flint, Michigan. What's the story?
So the water crisis throughout Indian country really is something that is, as you said, undiscussed and kind of unnoticed, and it's been going on for centuries, particularly with uranium mining. That's been happening since the 1950s. Cancer is, the leading people that have cancer are in the northern plains, and as a specific result of uranium mining, particularly lung cancer, the highest demographic in all the United States, and that's not being discussed.
Really?
We've got 30% of the Navajo Nation that doesn't have clean drinking water. This is an ongoing issue of open mines that are just left, and no one's cleaning them up. There's been efforts to try and remediate, and those efforts usually die in Congress, unfortunately. Rural lands are often right next to Native American communities, and so these extraction projects directly impact Native American communities, and no one cares. It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind, and that's kind of an overall theme.
So how do we bring it to sight?
I think there are efforts. Obviously, there are grassroots efforts on the ground to, draw attention to these issues. But really, I'm hopeful that there will be a coalition of people of color to really, understand that the Flint, Michigan issue. It's a perfect example of the United States' disparate treatment of minority people, and not caring about our minority populations when we should. Because just simply because you're poor doesn't mean that you don't matter. And if we can form those coalitions of people saying, hey, this is going on with these people, but this is also happening in Indian country, and it has been for a really long time. These are oppressed people we should recognize and, take care of, and address these issues. They're incredibly important issues.
This is more than the pipeline, and we all know it. This is a place where we have come together to say no.
Everything you see, from the trees to the land, to the food, to the horses, to the fish, everything in this world was made with water.
This river here, it feeds our people back home on our reservation, along with 18 million other people.
We are here stopping Dakota access from going under the Missouri River.
Water is life, and it is sacred, not just to the indigenous, but to all nations all around the world.
It's a form of a living being that's supported us and that we have a connection with. That's the thing that's going to sustain not only you, but your children.
It's really important that we stop this pipeline because it will eventually break and it'll poison all our water.
It's not if it will leak, it's when. All the evidence does not suggest it, it proves it.
We were put on this earth to protect our mother. And it's a simple job that we've neglected for way too long. If anybody ever feels like they don't have a purpose, they have a huge purpose. We're protecting the water because we know we're fighting extinction.
It's going to be our #1 issue. I mean, you look at what people are buying right now in terms of land grabs, it's all related to water. And it's ours, it's everyone's.
We're just taking and taking and taking and taking from the earth. And for Earth to heal herself, we have to protect that water.
Before you get started on the project, I want you to know and understand that we recognize our treaty boundaries. This is something that the tribe is not supporting. This is something that the tribe does not wish. The entire area that you're trying to take the pipeline through crosses our treaty boundaries and where we existed before anybody. And so we have significant sites and we know what they are.
The Dakota Access Pipeline begins in North Dakota's Bakken oil field and would carry crude oil almost 1,200 miles through South Dakota and Iowa down to Illinois. The pipeline's original path crossed the Missouri River just north of Bismarck, a city that is 90% white. But when concerns were raised about a potential oil spill there, the pipeline was rerouted south to go under the river right next to the Standing Rock Reservation. The Missouri River is the reservation's primary source of drinking water. The tribe says a spill there could be catastrophic for them. So when construction started, a plea for help went out.
I am asking anybody who is willing to stand with us to say that water is important to come stand with us.
LaDonna Brave Bull Allard put out that call. She's a member of Standing Rock, and her land looks over the ridge where the pipeline would be built.
When I put the call out, I really thought maybe 40 people would come. It's overwhelming. In my own vision, I didn't expect this.
Now, over 100 Native American tribes from across North America have joined Standing Rock's movement. And in this sprawling camp, a community has formed. This kitchen serves donated food to all. Kids can take classes at a makeshift school. Cords of donated firewood are split and stacked, free for the taking.
Why do you think that this has taken off and spoken to so many people from so many parts of the country?
The water. We know how precious that water is. We know that we must stand for the water. Miniwachoni, we say water of life. So every time we drink water, we remind ourselves how important the water is. Don't you do that? You will now.
Guy Jones was born in Standing Rock. He says the tribes are tired of being ignored.
They didn't want it in Bismarck, but it was, it's okay if the Indians, you can go down and run it through the reservation where all those Indians live. Who cares about the Indians? And that's one of the things is that, kind of incensed people.
Last month, the tribe sued the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, arguing that in its meetings with the tribe, the Corps ignored their concerns. David Archambault II is chairman of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe.
They never heard us. It was just a process that keeps moving forward because of the interest of economic development, the interest of money, the interest of greed.
But last Friday, a federal court in Washington rejected the tribe's suit, allowing the pipeline to proceed. It was at that point that the Justice Department halted the project, directing the Corps and other agencies to take a second look at the tribe's concerns. Now that the Department of Justice has stepped in and said they're going to halt this construction temporarily at least, is this over for you?
It's far from over. And we knew this coming in, that regardless of the outcome from the court's decision, this was the beginning.
The 2.5 million miles of oil and gas pipelines across the U.S. do sometimes leak and rupture. And when they do, they often spill far more oil than a single train car carries. Since 1995, there's been more than 2,000 significant accidents on oil and gas pipelines, causing about $3 billion in property damage. For example, in July 2010, at least 800,000 gallons of crude oil spilled into the Kalamazoo River near Marshall, Michigan. It was one of the largest inland oil spills in U.S. history and the costliest. Almost 5,000 acres of wetland habitat was inundated with oil. Hundreds of animals were killed. Thousands more were recovered, cleaned, and released. Full recovery could take decades. And just this summer, a pipeline in Canada spilled about 65,000 gallons of oil and other toxins into the North Saskatchewan River, polluting the drinking water used by the James Smith Cree Nation. The Petroleum Council says those kinds of spills near the Standing Rock Reservation are very unlikely.
This pipe is 90 feet below the riverbed. It's not going to leak right into the river. It's got the detection equipment and the shutoff valves on each side of this pipeline.
But LaDonna Allard doesn't believe the industry's assurances. She says 500,000 gallons of oil coursing every day under their drinking water is not safe.
When that oil spills, who's going to come save us? We're Indian people. We're expendable. Who is going to come? Who is going to come and give us water?
The tribe's other concern is that even though the pipeline is just off their reservation, it still runs right through areas they say are sacred ancestral grounds. 10 days ago, the tribe submitted evidence of newly discovered artifacts and burial sites, asking a state court for an emergency injunction. But before the court could make a decision, bulldozers started digging in that area. Protesters broke through a fence to try to stop them, they were met with pepper spray and guard dogs.
What's happening?
The Mesa people, that's what they're doing. Basically what we're doing is protecting the water, the water protectors. That's what we're doing right here. And all this you see right here is just that we need to stop it, They're basically on ACE property, which is the Army Corps of Engineers land, and it shouldn't even be up there. So we have every right. This is sovereign nation right here. This is sovereign people's land right here. So.
Oh! Who the fuck is that?
Okay? Here.
Nothing has drawn more attention to Native Americans and their political needs than the massive protests against an oil line right here in Standing Rock, North Dakota.
We're across Turtle Island united for one purpose, that we are in solidarity.
Native Americans are now only 2% of the population and have a very low voter turnout. But one determined activist is prepared to give these issues a voice.
Can you tell us what's significant about the fact that this protest is happening on this land?
This is treaty land that we're on. This is the treaty land of the Atechi-Shakowee. This is not the United States land, this is our land. We should not be at a place where we're still have unequal rights. We should not be in a place where, you're still slamming projects through our communities. Treaty rights should not be being violated in 2016. I think one thing that we've definitely seen is the power of social media, the ability to connect to one another. It's changed the conversation, it's changed the game. We can now reach out to one another over the internet and share our struggles. Children, women, men, all join together, going out in peaceful, direct action, standing together and praying over the pipeline, praying on the pipeline route, praying for the water.
How does this form of political protest then actually move to policy change?
This encampment and the direct actions against the pipeline construction, the people that are putting themselves in front of bulldozers to stop it from actually going in the ground, that has elevated this to an international level, to the point that we now have seen the president say that he stands with Standing Rock, that the Department of Justice, the Department of the Army, the Department of the Interior all put together a joint statement and said they're going to reassess the whole permitting process. That's incredible. That's how you get change done.
The political reality right now is a presidential election. How does all of this fit into the presidential election and Native Americans going to the polls?
The presidential candidates don't even mention Native Americans in their speeches. We're not even a thought. In order to get our conversation at the table, in order to be part of it, we need to actually engage and to get out and vote. Our votes still matter, our voices matter, our representation matters. We can no longer ignore this.
The youth, the International Indigenous Youth Council, we're there at every action to de-escalate because we knew how they felt. We were angry too. I was angry, I was pretty pissed off.
We do have a fire truck, but we need you guys to go south before we can bring the fire truck up.
At least we can guide them as youth to say, hey, if you're fighting for my future, do it this way. Just back off. You don't gotta say all those things. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to cuss at the police. You don't have to throw anything at them. We just kind of like talked them down. Well, after that, it got peaceful. And I thank God it got peaceful, because it got really, really tense there. But we came back in prayer. We reminded our people of what they were fighting for. Now that the pipeline got approved, it is very hard right now to remain in prayer and to remain peaceful. It is hard to have all this anger inside of you, to have everything in your being to say no, to try and stop that pipeline with all of that. Yeah, I know the feeling for a lot of men struggling not to pick up a gun because this is gonna kill their children. It's hard. But we keep on doing it right now. We are struggling to hold on to that part of ourselves that is pure, that is natural, that is nature. This has changed my life completely. My life will never be the same. I will never be the same girl I was when I first came to camp. I'll never be that person again, because I'm not scared. I used to be, but then I found courage. Many people gave me courage, and I'm going to continue this fight, and I'm probably going to continue fighting for the rest of my life.
80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is in indigenous lands. So we are the last holders of these sacred places and of the diversity of the world. You refer to Native people as kind of like this footnote in history. We were here before the arrival of the United States, before America, before Canada, but after that, there's really not anything. There's no more. It's this sad chapter of dispossession and genocide, and then it's just blank. We have to acknowledge and teach our children the truth, and not just the past truth, but the present truth also. When you stand on a piece of land that's been part of your people's history for thousands of years, your ancestors have lived and died there, it is a very different connection that you feel. It's your people's land, and you're almost entirely forgotten. You're a mascot, or you're a logo on a sports jersey. Within our communities, within indigenous communities, I've seen this healing of this trauma with every generation. With every new generation, it gets a little bit better. And it's still really hard. Youth suicide is a very, very common thing within Native communities, and it's really, really difficult. But there are all these youth, too, who are really empowered and are trying to overcome that. What gives me hope is seeing all of these youth rising up and really empowering themselves and being unafraid. The movement that began at Standing Rock, that everyone knows of, that it became a worldwide movement, was started by youth. It was started by youth that began the Sacred Stone Camp and then ran 2,000 miles from Cannonball, North Dakota, all the way to Washington, D.C. with their message. That was youth that did that. So seeing the power of them asserting themselves in these spaces, and the youth all over the world that are doing this, that are leading these conversations, that are questioning and challenging, what are you doing with my next generation? What are you doing with my future? This is my future on the line, and this is probably yours too if you're under the age of 30. As these water shortages begin, and as they're already ongoing, it's going to be the communities that are already at risk that are impacted first and worst. We are already impacted first and worst by climate change. There are already people that are migrating out from places that are out of water. That is going to happen. We are going to have some really serious conversations as human beings living in this shared world together about what kind of world we want it to be. I think that we have a long way to go as a society still in a lot of places, but that we do have a lot of power in Standing Rock, that it is a movement that has continued into divesting from banking institutions. I mean, this movement is continuing. So I hope that Standing Rock stands as a symbol of this is what happens when people can come together, and now we're awake And these fires have been carried all over the world, so let's continue and continue to grow together.